Hey guys, Matt here. Hebrews 10 today. Going to finish, I hope. And it's been an interesting study because thus far in Hebrews we see that it's all about Jesus Christ being more, Jesus Christ being higher, Jesus Christ being superior. He's higher than the prophets, he's higher than the angels, he's higher than he's from a better line, he's a better priest, he's the be all end all priest, he's from the line of Melchizedek. We see that although he was God, he did not think equality with God a thing to be grasped. He laid it down, took on the morphe, the form of a man. He who knew no sin became sin. He's just this terrific process where Jesus Christ comes and pays for our sin once and for all. He becomes the propitiation for our sin. And then yesterday we got to Hebrews 10:26, which is an interesting verse because it says, "For if we go on sinning deliberately after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but a fearful expectation of judgment and a fury of fire that will consume the adversaries." Okay, so who are the adversaries? Well, they're the people that go on sinning deliberately. Well, why would somebody go on sinning deliberately? Well, in Hebrews 3 and 4 we saw a clear dictate. Today when you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion. And that's what happens to people. I think Matthew 13 describes it best. They receive the seed with great joy. And then something happens along the way before salvation actually takes place. That's what's happening here, I believe personally, because I think most of them are converted, most of them are Christians, and they're just being warned, they're just being exhorted, they're just being encouraged to persevere. Persevere, which is what we're going to see next in chapter 11. But there were some that were falling away. That's why this letter is written so abruptly. It doesn't have the hello, how are you, greetings from so-and-so. It just gets right into it because the time is of the essence. People are receiving persecution and it's choking out the seed, which means they were never born again to begin with, I believe. In America, we receive the seed with joy, some of us, and guess what chokes it out? Money, the love of money, the love of the world. But here, it was the persecution. And we see that manifesting itself in three ways. They spurn the Son of God, they profane the blood of the covenant, this blood that could actually wash their conscience clean, although the blood of bulls and goats could not. They profane the blood of the covenant, and they outrage the Spirit of grace. That means they blaspheme the Holy Spirit, right? Then he gets to verse 32, and he kind of brings it to a logical conclusion. He says, "But recall the former days, when after you were enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, and sometimes being partners with those so treated." It was going around. See, right now, at this point, he's bringing them back to a point where they first got saved. And he's saying, recall these days. Recall, even though you went through tough times, you persevered. And then next chapter, he's going to talk about all these saints that did nothing but persevere. And it's at this point where I think it's good to take a little time out and say, what was going on with the Jews? What would happen when they got born again? Well, in some instances, they would have funerals for them. Their family would completely disown them. They would have funerals for them. It happens in some of the Hindu communities. It happens in some of the Muslim communities. They're as good as dead. And he's saying, hey, remember those days. You were publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, and you were with people that were so treated, and yet you had compassion on those in prison. And you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. He's reminding them, remember when you got saved, you were getting your butts kicked, you were getting your property stolen, you were being mistreated, all those around you were being mistreated. But you had joy. You had joy. What's that a sign of? We saw that in 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians. The joy is evidence of the Holy Spirit. That's what it's evidence of true salvation. When people can accept the plundering of their property with joy, they're the real deal. And he's encouraging them. He's saying, go back. Remember that time. Remember that time. And he goes on in verse 35, because of this, therefore, Do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward, right? A great reward, an eternal one, an abiding one. For you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. We have great need of endurance too, right? So that when we do the will of God, we will receive what is promised. That's what he's telling the Jews here. Hey, guys, you need to endure. You need to persevere. And then he brings them back to Habakkuk in verse 37. He says, Yet a little while, and the coming one who will come and will not delay, but my righteous ones shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. That means no pleasure in him. That means he will receive judgment. That ties into verse 26. There is nothing left. For those who fall back, there is nothing left but a fearful expectation of judgment and a fury of fire that will consume the adversaries. It's a big deal. They were never saved to begin with. They were close. They might have been on the road to salvation, but something came along, and in this case it was persecution. And persecution either refines a believer, it brings them to more faith, or it chokes out the seed that was placed in them. Then verse 39, But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and persevere their souls. I love how he ends it there. It's kind of, that's where it sounds like Paul, and I don't care who wrote Hebrews, it doesn't matter because it's all inspired by God, but he ends it on a positive note. He says, But we are not of those who shrink back, no, and are destroyed. Hello, if you shrink back, you're going to be destroyed. But of those who have faith and persevere. And then we get into chapter 11. And chapter 11 is dynamite. I'm going to read the first verse. Now faith, this is the faith he's talking about. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. For by it, by faith, the people of old received their commendation. Some other translations say that our elders received their just rewards, or our elders received their testimony, or something like that. But this is the logical culmination, right? Jesus is more. Don't go back to that old Levitical system. Keep pressing on, and then this is what faith looks like. Chapter 11 is going to be what faith looks like, what faith walks like, what faith talks like, when faith has legs, when faith grows up, when faith is mature. And we're going to get into that. And it's amazing because the people of faith in the Hall of Faith, they all have one thing in common. They never received their goodies here on earth. It's kind of like the antithesis of the prosperity gospel. And this is the real deal here. So we're going to get into that tomorrow. Thanks. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.